Hello, dear friends. A big warm welcome to you all. This is the 14th edition of the Chennai Storytelling Festival 2026. And today is the second day of the third weekend. In fact, two glorious weekends go by with a lot of interesting events. And it's so lovely to see you all here. Thank you so much for joining in this evening from wherever you are, in whichever part of the world. And we're very fortunate to have with us today some very accomplished master storytellers. And we are waiting to travel with them to delve and discover. So let's go. We start today's evening with the most sacred place that everyone starts off at. The most safest of the places that won a board of divinity for everyone. Yes, it's the womb. And from there to the culminating point is where every individual charters their course. And to take us through this course is Dr. Dawood Vaid from Mumbai. He's an educationist of the Golden Sparrow Education. Dr. Dawood, please tell us a little bit more about yourself and tell us the story.
Thank you so much, Divya, and good evening, and welcome to everyone wherever you are. It's an honor to be here. So my journey started as an engineer right there from Chennai. Grew up in the beautiful Andaman Nicobar Islands. Did my work with IIT Delhi for some time. I'm a corporate lawyer, but ultimately I found my calling in schools and children. And perhaps a little bit of story in me is from what I do with the children. I currently work in Mumbai, a small organization which is an alternative school called the Golden Sparrow, or if you translate, it's called Sone Ki Chidiya. And I primarily work with homeschoolers across India. Done. Shall we just proceed with the story right there?
Yes, Dr. Vaid, right over.
So once again, thank you so much. And here we go. So the title of the story is more symbolic, called Womb to Tomb, or rather learning from womb to tomb. There is an Arabic proverb which says that you learn when you are born until you die. These are two milestones in our lives. It essentially, the way we understand is the moment you stop learning is the moment you stop living. And to me, this is the ultimate, the pinnacle of learning that we always are seeking to learn. One of my teachers told me something very beautiful. You learn three ways. One is reading, which is primarily like what the dinosaurs are in today's time, extinct among our young learners. So we don't read anymore. Hopefully not here. It's blasphemous to call storytellers that we don't read. But the more I work with children and the more social media that comes in their life, it is so dormant and so almost extinct. The other way you learn is by meeting people, and I'm so amazed at the gorgeous people here. Eric, you're amazingly doing some amazing work among getting people together. Last 2 weeks, the fortnight has been, and then what I have, built my story on is traveling. So the three ways you learn is reading, experiences, and traveling. And today's story, our protagonist is a traveler. Think of him as someone who's traveling across the world. I've borrowed these anecdotes and tales from my travel with a little bit of conversation that I've done. And hopefully we'll go through these travel in the next 15 to 20 minutes with all of us seeing ourselves in those places as a traveler. I grew up learning about Sinbad the sailor. My father is a merchant navy captain, and I've heard stories about him going to Mombasa in Africa, in Netherlands, in Brazil, in Sri Lanka, in Myanmar, and it fascinated me. How can somebody be such an amazing, just sailing the world is so beautiful. For my part, I used to travel and I do travel a lot across India primarily. I say I'm the reluctant Ibn Battuta, the Marco Polo version of the Arabic traveler. And I always say, give me an India pin code number and I'll be there. So these are the stories we are going to talk about in the travel version. So the first story comes from womb, and we'll divide the story into womb, life, and tomb. Womb, as Divya so beautifully said, is the first home for anybody. It's a human, an animal, any species. The most comfortable, perhaps the safest place to be is the womb. And you know something amazing? Science tells us that we hear first, then we see. Our capacity of hearing, right, develops beyond a capacity of seeing. And perhaps as storytellers, this is what the most important ingredient all of us need to have: the ability to listen. We are so judgmental when we speak. We are waiting for others to, we're waiting to interrupt others. And listening is an art. And to me, my story begins in Russia, a place I used to travel where, Moscow was supposed to be a place where we were afraid to travel. The Russians by itself. And then I learned this beautiful song at the height of Cold War. There's a lyrics which says, and they love their children too. And this is it. Today, with all the conflicts happening around the world, everybody loves their children and every child comes from the womb. If only we could hear others' perspective, if only we could listen to others. And there is this anecdote that is so relevant to me. So sitting as a patent lawyer among these scientists in Tverskaya, in Moscow, I would be wondering at the stories the Russians would tell us. And then in evening, after the scientist becomes us, there are a couple of vodkas around, and then I'm even more amazed at the stories they tell us. Because in India, if you have a little bit of anything that is wine or rum, you will start talking about either cricket or Bollywood. But not in Russia. I heard these scientists speak about schools and education and children and pedagogy. And perhaps I decided that day to become an educator rather than an engineer. And that's what the power of listening does. If only we listen to the people, if only we hear people around. Growing up in Kolkata, which is where I was born, my father took me to a place called Shanti Niketan. That is where Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, India's Nobel laureate, the Gitanjali, and I learned this, and this is a poem which is so relevant in what we are talking about today, where the mind is without fear and where the knowledge is free. And in the entire story, it says, into that heaven of freedom, my father let my country awake. In this narrow, fragmented walls that the world is divided into, the first lesson I learned from womb as is, can we listen to each other? Can we just go around and listening? So this is where womb starts in. And I'll give you even a better anecdote. So I said, born in Kolkata, raised in Andaman, did my engineering from Chennai, and it's so relevant. I must have an anecdote from Chennai growing up there. Wherever you are in the world, you come to Chennai and you meet one of the Chennai auto rickshaws, you know you arrived. You learn your negotiation, you learn your bargaining power, you learn your willpower, everything comes in there. And this is beautiful. And sometimes, we are so eager to cut down the cost and we fight for something which is not relevant to us, but for them. So here is a small. I was traveling from a place called Nungambakam, say, and with the little Tamil I know, I bargained a 200 rupees fare with the auto rickshaw, And as we were going by, it's a long road. It was raining. I remember the beautiful weather we had. I said, Anna, can we stop at tea kade and can we have little tea? And all I did, I was shivering, I was wet. I offered 1 cup of tea to him. That's all. That's all I did. I did not anything. A 10 rupee cup would not cost me anything. So as I was sipping my tea, I offered my tea to this auto rickshaw driver. As we reached the destination, he says, "Macha, nur watare," in which basically means, brother, or slang, just give me 100 rupees. I said, no, you had agreed on 200. He says, no, that was overpriced. I only, and even I'm charging you more, it's 100 rupees. If only we could be empathetic, if only we could connect with each other, is the world that we're looking in. One of the reasons that I think stories are all around us. I met this India's great quizmaster, Derek O'Brien. Growing up in Kolkata, my mother took me to his shows and I asked him, sir, where do you get your quizzes from? And he said, it's around us. Look around us. Stories are us. There's a beautiful, the toy shop called Toys R Us, stories are us. So that's the first part of womb. Just listening helps us connect. As a traveler, I listen to people. You are great people. Look at you, patiently listening. And I must congratulate Eric of preparing for this and back and forth. Use I use my slide or not. I listened to at least 20 of the storytelling sessions rendered in the last fortnight. Listening was amazing. It is, the story of the dragon, the story of somebody going. It's beautiful. Then we go on to the part of life. Life itself teaches us so much across. Womb to tomb is the beauty of it is all of us know how to walk. But that does not mean we know how to run a marathon. We have this Mumbai marathon, which is very popular. But because I know how to breathe does not mean I know how to live. There are people who are dead by 20s but only buried at 50. And somehow we've forgotten the art of living. We've forgotten the joy of living. Stories keep us alive. So this is my second version of going to Japan and working with this Tohoku University, and amazing people they are. But there is a story I picked up from that part of the far eastern part of Asia. And this is about a young architect, very much like me, glow-eyed when he landed in Tokyo, and an architect saw the amazing structure around. And the first thing he saw was a building, a tall building. And he asked somebody, who is the architect? Do I need to know him? And they says, Siri Marin, or perhaps the best Japanese I can come up with, Siri Marin, and is what he said. He made note out in his notebook, and he said, that's it. Then he saw a landscape garden, a beautiful garden, the Japanese garden that we see here. Imagine the one in Japan, beautiful, the cherry blossom trees. And he said, can I know the architect who landscaped this garden? And somebody said, Siri Marin. All right, Sirimaran, I must meet this man. The same thing, he saw a bridge and he asked the person who built the bridge, and somebody said Sirimaran. And he said, I would be damned if I don't meet this great legend before I leave Japan. And as he's walking, he saw a funeral. And, as a part of respect, he joins the funeral and he says, this looks like a very important man. Who is the person who's died? And they said, Sirimaran. And he felt a sense of, despair. The very legend I wanted to meet, the one who built these, marvels, is the one whose funeral I'm attending. And as he's walking back dejected, and he's now leaving Japan, on the airport, he said, I missed the one important thing I wanted to do in Japan. And they said, what was that? And they said, I forgot, I could not meet Sirimaren. I said, Sirimaren? Sirimaren in Japanese means I don't know. And all this time, he harbored the idea, it's sometime the world is so large, we don't know. The joy of not, in Arabic, it says, La adri. There was a scholar who was asked a question and he says, I don't know. He said, that's half the knowledge. So when somebody says, you'll ask questions to me, I'm scared. I'm a school teacher, but I'm scared when somebody asks questions to me. The joy of not knowing is beautiful. Siri Maren is a lesson I've learned. It's not enough to know everything. It's wonderful to know your ignorance, because that teaches you how little we know and how much amazing thing is out there. So that's the second part. The third part is the tomb. And this is interesting. This is an anecdote I've picked up. Men never get flowers except at the funerals. So I haven't, in my college, I've given enough on the days which are special. But isn't it sad? They say that regret is a greater emotion than gratitude, which is why you see more flowers at the cemetery than at somebody's occasion or birthdays. And tomb is when we end our life, what are we looking back at? What are we looking at and saying, okay, I left a legacy, I left something worth saying, except but stories. Between womb to tomb, it could be very short time if you look at the years that you lived. But if you look at the amount of stories you had, I think that will be amazing. So my last story is about self-reflection. It's a story I picked up from South Africa about a photojournalist, a Pulitzer-winning photojournalist. His name is Kevin Costner. Kevin was an amazing young 30-year-old photojournalist. He goes to a place in Somalia. The picture is so vivid. You can Google the picture of a young boy, a Somali boy, and a vulture waiting, leeching on the boy to die and bite on him. And Kevin shot the picture. Kevin was there, right there, picking the picture up. And then he got the award for it. He was lauded. He was, people said Kevin was an amazing, but he could not live with it. And this is a true story of Kevin ultimately ending his life. He said, I could not look at myself because I was there and I took the picture and I was awarded for it, but I could not save the boy. And in his defense, he couldn't have done anything. This is way beyond what we're talking. But where have we stepped in? When is the last time we had, and this is called the bystander effect. The bystander effect is when you see an evil happening and you're waiting and doing nothing about it. When we go to our graves and we go to our cemeteries, when we go to a tomb, what is the bystander effect we are looking into? What is that one thing that you're looking into? I wish I could have changed. And to me, these are the stories that change our way of version. So that's what I'm talking to you. All the life that we live between womb to tomb, It could be very little in terms of years, but amazing if the stories become us. You know, it's just walking, talking, changing. Your stories can change somebody's life. So please tell your stories. And I end with this beautiful song. As college students, we loved in the boy's own word, and words are all I have to take your heart away. I think it's words which weave magic. So let's live our life between moon to tomb and let's tell our stories. Let's be travelers, even a reluctant traveler like me and Ibn Battuta. Let's all our stories are part of our legacy. Thank you so much.
Wow, wow, what to say? Dr. Vaid, you took us on that wonderful tour, and lovely personal anecdotes. Personal storytelling is always special, from Mumbai to Russian party conversations to Santiniketan to back home, Chennai, and then Japan to cherry blossom, and pinpointing that ignorance is bliss sometimes. Yes, it is. And sometimes it's not bliss, because we shouldn't be a bystander by being ignorant about what is happening. That armchair travel was truly enchanting for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's an honor.
Why did you want to pick this story for us? What made you pick this, and how did you stitch this garland, I might say, today?
So one of the motivation that I always look at today, and I think it's the kids I teach, is today we are so socially connected and we are so distant from each other. Perhaps there is no better joy than hugging somebody, shaking hands, and the only way is stepping out of a comfort zone, our homes, our social media, and meeting people. If I can encourage people to buy tickets and travel, that'll be an honor.
Yeah, it was very wonderful how you said, if there is a pin code, you would be there. That is, that's very nice. I mean, to hear, Usha, you were wanting to say something?
Yes. So, Dr. Dawood, what a fabulous story through anecdotes. And I loved your reference, all the reference, the womb to the tomb, and also the bully, the bullied, and the bystander, what you spoke about. I wanted to ask you, why did you choose this particular topic? Was there
Thank you so much, Usha ma'am, for the kind words. And perhaps I lost someone very special early, last year. And we used to play football. We almost, the fathers that we've got. And I realized that it's the moments that matter so much. Then people live in our memories. So perhaps Womb to Tomb was a dedication to someone I really loved and I lost, and perhaps a mentor, a brother to me. And I realize if I can encourage myself and others to meet before we, regret as an emotion is so huge, can we convert that into gratitude? And that's what perhaps led me to this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a beautiful answer. Like in our healing group, we prepare for death so that we keep our house in order. That's one of the steps that we take. And this is beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Usha. Denise would like to say something, ask or say something. Yes, Denise?
I enjoyed listening to you so very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
And what I really appreciate hearing this morning is all of the small episodes or vignettes were lovely, but about being the bystander. It is so difficult not to be the bystander and to speak up when everyone around you is moving in a different direction. There's so much isolation to it and so much self doubt that can come with it as well. And just to have a story that says, no, you continue to do what is right, and that deliberate action, just being reminded of it like that outweighs all of the negatives that can surround you. So in being deliberate, being connected with nature, and just again moving with deliberation with every choice, small actions, large actions. Thank you so very much. It was a nice way to start off my day.
Thank you so much, Denise. I completely echo what you said, and you summed up so beautifully. So I'm at loss of words now. Absolutely beautiful what you said.
Yes, truly put. It is perceived right now, we are so connected more than what we were probably earlier times. There's so much more, we are like, you can reach anybody anywhere, and the connection seems to be like really tight, but somehow it still is distant, like they say. So probably the real connection is what we need to be looking out for. So that was lovely. Anybody else would like to say something? Okay. Shall we move on to the next story? So we move on to the next story then, and the storyteller. So pilgrims and pilgrim ways are often the essence of utmost reflection and the willingness to strive. And probably the path could be arduous, but they are willing to give it their all. I'm only guessing the premise of our next story that Maria LoBiondo, a celebrated storytelling teaching artist from New Jersey, is bringing to us. Pilgrim Ways, Maria says. Maria, please tell us a little bit more about yourself and tell us the story.
Well, thank you, Divya. And thank you, Dr. Vaid, for that story. Actually, it's kind of interesting that I'm following you because my story has travel in it, and it has reading in it, and it has experience in it. So the things you spoke about, this is a good segue. I'm a teller mostly of folk and fairy tales. And some time ago, someone said to me that folk and fairy tales don't matter anymore. And since I've been telling them for about 30 years, I have to tell you, I was crushed. So I started to think about how to make them more relevant. And I decided to weave together a personal reflection with a folk tale. And so that's what I'm hoping to share with you now. And you'll see how it unfolds and tell me if you think it works. Folk tales often begin with there was an old woman who, or a man went on a journey, or once upon a time. And once upon a time, I found myself living a folk tale. A friend sent an article about the rarest pasta in the world. You know, noodles. This pasta was made at that time by only one woman in Sardinia, that large island off of Italy. And she had learned to make it from her mother, and her mother had learned to make it from her mother. It had passed down her matrilineal line. And she would make this dough and then stretch it into 256 threads and let it dry on a circular frame. It was called Soufilindu, the threads of God. When the pasta dried, it was broken into smaller pieces and served in a golden broth only twice a year to pilgrims who made an overnight trek of about 20 miles to a sanctuary church. When I told my husband, Charlie, about this, he said, "We must go." that directive reminded me of a folk tale. It's told in many cultures, but my favorite one comes from Eastern Europe, about a man named Avram who has a boring job, and so to get through the day, he daydreams. And he daydreams about having someday a great feast with all his friends and family, the table piled high with food, and everyone is laughing and joking and telling stories. And one night, Avram has a dream. And in that dream, it's very strange because he sees a city with a castle and a bridge leading to the castle. And a voice says to him, Avram, go to the capital city, go to the castle, and go to the bridge that leads to the castle. There you will find a treasure. You must go. Well, Avram wakes up with a start. This is so strange because he's never been more than 5 miles from his little village. And he thinks about that dream all day. So the dream comes back. And the next night when he has it, he wakes up and his wife is next to him. And she says, Avram, what is it? So he tells her. And she says, Avram, you're such a daydreamer, it's no surprise you would have a strange dream at night. Now it's time to get up. She was the practical one. Well, he thinks about the dream again all day, and you know what happens. He has the dream again. And in folk tales and in life, something that happens 3 times is a message. So Avram gets up, he tells his wife to make him some food, he takes out his boots, the bottoms are flapping from the bottom, the soles are flapping, so he gets cloth and he ties the soles of the boots, kisses everyone, and he takes off for his dream. Well, Charlie and I began to prepare for this trip, and I am the practical one. So I wanted to know, do we need hiking boots? Do we need backpacks? I could find lots of information about the pasta, but not about the trek. How hard was it? Would we be going uphill and downhill? Fortunately, my youngest brother had a friend and there was a blog and it told me that we did indeed need to prepare. And so we began to practice trekking, and we got a travel agent, and the travel agent helped us get to Nuoro. Now, Sardinia is known for its beautiful beaches, but Nuoro is inland in a part of Sardinia that's called the Wilds, the Barbagia. And when we got there, we were like the only English speakers there. The clerk at the hotel, thank goodness, he spoke some English. He had heard about this pilgrimage. He had never gone. And you could tell he thought we were crazy. But he helped us. He helped us get a taxi ride to the courtyard, the piazza in front of the church where the pilgrimage was going to start at midnight. And while we're there in the dark and the piazza is filling up, I looked around and realized we were the only English speakers there, and we were going to need help. Well, I looked around, and there was a woman about my size, about my age, and she was talking to a young man who looked every bit a professional hiker. He had the boots, he had the jacket, he had the backpack. And so we made our way to Franca, and in my broken Italian, I introduced us, and Franca was thrilled that due Americani were going to go on this pilgrimage. And she introduced us to Giovanni. And as the pilgrimage was about to set off, she pulled on my jacket, Franca did, and like the wise women in all the folk tales, she gave me sage advice. Stay with Giovanni. Now, in the folktale, Avram sets off for the capital city, and he walks and he walks and he walks, and sometimes he has help. He has a ride on the back of a hay cart to rest his feet, or a farmer says to him, "Oh, you can sleep in my barn tonight so you don't have to sleep out under the stars." Or a farmer's wife gives him some bread and cheese to have on the journey. Well, he keeps walking, and one day, when he comes through the trees, he sees before him the very vision of his dream. There's the capital city. There's the castle. There's the bridge that leads to the castle. He's amazed, and he makes his way to the bridge. But when he gets to the bridge, he sees that there are guards, sentries, going back and forth over the bridge to guard the castle. And he looks around and he doesn't see any treasure, and he didn't bring a shovel, so he doesn't know what to do. And then he thinks, maybe I'll have a dream tonight. So he stays at the bridge, but that night he doesn't have a dream. The second day, he stays at the bridge hoping he'll have a dream that night. But he doesn't have a dream. And on the morning of the third day, he hears a voice from the top of the bridge. And the voice says, "You there! This is the third day you're here at this bridge. What is your business here?" And guards come and they grab Avram and they march him up to the captain of the guards. Now, what is Avram going to say? The truth is strange enough. So he tells the truth. He tells the captain of the guard about his dream. "What?" says the captain. "What a fool you are. Why, if I believed in dreams like that, I would make my way to some village, who knows how far away, and look for someone named Avram. And when I found him, I would go to his house and start digging under his stove for a treasure. But do you see me leaving my post here? No." Avram thanked the captain of the guards, turned around, and began to walk home. Now, Charlie and I walked with Giovanni. And, well, the first part of the pilgrimage was on a road, and that was easy. And there was even a volunteer who parked his car on the road, lifted the trunk, and was handing out little shots of espresso to give us a extra courage as we walked our way. But after a few miles, we went into the wilds. We went into where all the pastures were, and the narrow, gravel, rock-strewn ways that the farmers brought their cows and their sheep from pasture to pasture. And we were far from the city lights. We did have headlamps, but there was only the stars above us. Oh, and they were beautiful, so many stars. And we had to walk up and down, and as the pilgrims stretched out, it was a good thing we were with Giovanni, because it was not a well-marked path. We would still be in Sardinia without Giovanni. But in truth, it wasn't so much that we stayed with Giovanni, but that Giovanni stayed with us and guided us. And there were other volunteers along the way. There were 2 bonfires where we could warm ourselves up a little bit, have some water or tea. You couldn't stay too long, because if you got cold, that was not good. We kept going, and as we climbed, sometimes we heard the cows mooing or the donkeys braying because they heard us coming by. And once I heard a shriek. It sounded like a woman screaming, and I was so afraid. But Giovanni told me that it was a fox barking. We walked the whole night through, and then we eventually saw that the stars were fading and the purple and pink of dawn was beginning to fill the sky. And we were back on the roads again, and there was yet another stop for shots of espresso. And we thought, oh, we must almost be there. But we had several more miles to go. And Avram walked home all the way back, and he had help from those same kindly farmers on his way home. And when he got near his village, a great shout went up because nobody expected ever to see him again. And his children and his wife came running. They kissed him and welcomed him, and he walked with them back to his house. And then he promptly went to get a shovel, and he began to dig under the stove. Ow! His wife screamed. She was sure, truly, he was crazy. But he didn't stop. He dug and dug and dug and hit something hard. And then he kept digging until he found a box. He lifted the box up and he opened it. And inside was a treasure. With that treasure, Avram paid all his debts, and he took care of his family. And then he made his daydream come true. A great feast, the table long, piled high with food. Avram sat at the head, and all his family and his friends were on either side, and they were laughing and joking and telling stories. And as Avram looked at all his friends and family having such a good time, he thought to himself, This is the real treasure. Sometimes you have to travel far to find what is near. And Charlie and I, well, we finally made it to that little sanctuary church where more volunteers served us coffee and biscuits, and then we were led to a room with long tables and given bowls of golden broth filled with souffle-and-dew, the threads of God. And I have to tell you, after walking overnight, 20-some miles, it tasted heavenly. But I would also like to tell you that I had a great revelation. But that would not be true. Because it wasn't until much later, thinking about the folk tale, that I realized that this is the treasure. When we're all together, whether on Zoom or in person, telling our stories. This is the real treasure. Sometimes you have to travel far to find what is near.
Oh, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. From how Dr. Vaid started on the travel, we are continuing to have a wonderful ride. How you interwove the personal experience with that folktale, Maria, was absolutely lovely.
Thank you, Divya. Thank you.
Yeah.
I know Denise has heard it before.
Sorry?
I know Denise has heard it before.
Oh.
So, yeah. So
we loved listening to it. Yeah, every bit. It was so vivid. All the scenes that you were bringing, there's espresso shots, the bonfires, the headlights. Wow. And Giovanni in the story, and how he helped you find the souffle.
Yes.
Is that the word?
We truly would have been lost without him. And that to me is the folk tales have that wisdom if
Mm.
we are able to match the metaphors to how we live. So that's kind of an extension of what Dr. Vaid was saying. You know, it's the metaphors in the folk tales and fairy tales that can enliven our own stories. That was what I hope that I was able to convey.
Oh, you did, absolutely. Wonderful. Denise? Yes, go ahead.
Me?
Yes, you.
Okay, I
Could
wasn't
I
quite
request
sure.
you to be
Maria?
come closer to the
Sure.
mic if it's possible? Yeah.
I'm just going to move that over. Maria, I loved your story. And you know what I loved about it, particularly this time? Besides you speaking of the glorious night sky with the stars, was the fox. That a fox's bark sounds like a woman's screaming. That is such a rich detail, and I hope that I remember it because that just added so much. You know, I know that foxes smell like skunks, and now I know that they bark like a banshee. So that was really incredible. I just loved your detail of the environment and the world with the interaction and your part in that. So thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you. It's those metaphors again that make the stories more vivid, whether they're personal or folktales.
We're all Little Red Riding Hood. That's what I stand by.
So Maria, did you want to, did something stand out in the story? Did something very specific that you would look back and said, yes, that is something I would.
So really the impetus for this was this person telling me that folk tales don't matter. And I just was crushed when this person said that. And I thought, you know, there must be a way to show that isn't true, you know, because I really believe in the folk and the fairy tales have so much wisdom and they've passed down from generation to generation, like that pasta, you know. The woman's name is Paola, and she now has someone else to help make it, and the pasta is now served in Noro at restaurants, but originally it was just served those 2 times, and that, you know, that skill was passed down to her from her mother and her grandmother and her grandmother's grandmother, you know, I mean, and that's how the folk tales are. They're the wisdom of our ancestors, and we can't let them go, you know. And yes, we can recreate them in different ways, but they give us something. I don't know. I just feel so strongly about them.
Very true. Like you said, it's the wisdom that is being passed on. Yes, and that which gets carried on for generations to come.
Yes.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you again for that wonderful story, Maria.
Thank you, Divya. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
And moving on to the
Divya, I think Oro has her hand up.
I did not notice. I'm so sorry.
She's been having it for some time.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Oro. Please go ahead.
Can I make a comment, please? Maria, thank you so much for this story. Now, I tell the story of the dream and the treasure. It seems that, which is what you told, it seems that that story originated in India and traveled to Europe. It's told in Ireland, and it's told in Eastern Europe, among Jews in Eastern Europe. And the dream that this Avram had was to celebrate the Sabbath with, by inviting so many friends and having a lot of food and wine and enjoy themselves in the restful day of the Sabbath. Now, when I tell that story to children, I always said in the end, either they comment or I tell them, pursue your dreams ever. When you have a dream, you have to follow up. Now, what interested me most was the way you intertwined it with your own story with Charlie, your husband, and yourself doing the pilgrimage to Sardinia. That was really, really fascinating for me. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's always interesting to hear how the story can, when it's retold, can offer new insights. I love that you tell the children you tell it to keep dreaming.
Thank you, Oro. Thank you, ma'am, for pointing out. I did not notice, Oro. I'm so sorry. Right. Shall we move on to the next story now? Okay. So the next story is about how every day we see silent reminders around us. Reminders of growth, of resilience, and generosity. And I suppose a lot of it comes, I think most of everything comes to us as a gift from the woods. And let's see what acclaimed storyteller and performer Denise McCormack of New Jersey brings to us in what she calls Wondrous Wood. Denise, please tell us a little bit more about yourself and tell us the story.
Good morning. I have been telling stories for a long time, and like Maria, I enjoy doing a critical analysis and really digging into the origins and the different wisdom pots of gold that are in there, and find that you get different bits of wisdom depending on where you are in your life, and that stories grow to fit the listener. This story that I'm going to share with you is called The Wonderful, Wonderful Wood, or The Wonderful, Wondrous Wood. And Maria, I'm sure, has heard me tell this story before. It actually has remnants from the oral tradition, and you can hear that in here with the repetition. I heard this story orally. I've never seen a written copy of it anywhere, but it's just that memorable that hearing it once or twice was enough to stick it into my head. I heard a recording of it that was told by Ruth Tong, who was an English Canadian storyteller. And it is about a wood, both a wood as a forest and a wood as a tree. And just for a little bit of background, in researching this story, and know that we don't see trees that grow or as old as they had been long ago. People have cut them down. But looking back to newspapers from the 1500s, there were some woods and some trees whose limbs cast a shadow a mile wide. And so you can imagine how very tall they were and how ominous they were, and can be looked upon as great spiritual entities. So this story is called The Wonderful, Wondrous Wood. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yes.
Once there was a wonderful, wondrous wood. And all the people thereabouts were afeard of it, even the king himself. And the king was a vile and wicked man, whose chief occupation was to hunt down young maids, to have his wicked way with them, and to run them through and leave them dead. And so all of the mothers and all of the fathers sent their daughters away if they could. But there was one poor girl whose mother did not have the capacity to send her away. And so she kept the girl hidden away in their small cottage by the wood. And the two would harvest and plant what they needed there from the verge and their small garden. And they would twist up hanks of wool. And the mother would take what they had made to market, sell what they had, to buy what they needed. And in this way, they lived a very tidy life. And that was okay, wasn't it? Now, it happened that one day the old mother fell sick and she was too weak to go to market. And so what was she to do? She called her daughter, wrapped her in a voluminous cloak with hood, gave her the basket with the hanks of wool, and advised her before the girl left the house, do not go through the wood. Walk quietly around it to get to town, quietly, never going in. And the girl listened to her mother, and she walked on tiptoe, going around that wood along the perimeter near the verge. She hadn't gone very far when who should she see but the king and his faithful men, not too far in the distance. And as she saw the king saw her. And what was the poor girl to do? She froze in her tracks. She couldn't go forward. She couldn't go backward. And so she turned herself and she went into that wonderful wood. She walked through the wood where the oaken tree stood, and curtsy did she to the oaken tree, and it let her go down to the town, and luck it went with her all up and down from the wood. The wood, the wonderful, wonderful wood. And that was all right, wasn't it? But now the king having seen that young maid, his courses, his blood boiled with a bloodlust that he could not contain. And he pulled the reins of his horse, feeling in a flash that if that girl could go into that wood, then so should and would he. He rode through the wood where the oaken tree stood, and cursed did he the oaken tree, and he drew his sharp blade for to murder the maid. but a bough it fell quick and broke it his neck. In the wood, the wood, the wonderful, wonderful wood. And that was all right, wasn't it? But even as the king had ridden into that wood, his faithful men were close behind and trailed after him. They rode in the wood where the oaken tree stood to cut down the tree, the oaken tree. But the tree gave a groan and summoned his own. The trees closed about, and they never got out from the wood. The wood, the wonderful, wonderful wood. And that was all right. And now I'd like to invite you to sing the tail end of that verse with me. From the wood, the wood, the wonderful, wonderful wood. And that's all right. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
you took us into the woods, and especially that song, so soulful, Denise. So soulfully you sing, so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Trees can talk, trees can feel. The woods are so full of life. What a beautiful story it was, Denise. What made you choose this today? Are you able to?
Yeah, the reason that I chose this today is because I had seen something where we were going to talk about animism and our connection with the interconnected web of existence, and cultures around the world had believed that trees were everything from conduits where their roots reach down into the realm of death and up into the heavens, and that birds carried messages, and that the first people were created from different trees, the ash, for instance, and the birch. The oak tree itself, and I should have mentioned this before we got started, the oak tree is revered, sometimes being a masculine figure, sometimes being a feminine, probably non-gendered, as most, I'm going to say, world gods before patriarchy came in and switched things up were, as far as the supreme essence from which all things came. And the oak, particularly over in the British Isles, was where we get Rockabye Baby from. It was from putting a baby by the tree so that it would get the blessings that came from the oak spirit. People took vows there, whether it was vows and duty to the king and kingdom, or vows of love, faithfulness, loyalty. Medicines have come from kings. The wounded were laid at the roots of the oak tree for its healing blessings. The oak and the ivy, There are things connected with that as far as druidry goes and the healthful benefits from both and from being in the presence thereof, not to mention the enormity of the oak and how tall and wide the trees would grow. And when I had said before that we don't see what trees look like, there are some pictures from long ago that show 40 people inside a tree. And the trees were massive. And one of the very first industries in the New World here, when the colonists came over in the 1600s, was to cut down the trees for firewood so that the furnaces could get hot enough to make stained glass for the churches, because the trees in England had become depleted, as many different things in this wide world had. Even going off trees for a moment, the raccoons and the beavers, the reason that beavers were so valuable for trade, it wasn't just because people wanted their pelts. It was because they gnawed on willow trees, which is where we get salicylic acid from, which is aspirin. And the beavers, that salicylic acid would congeal or go into the fatty part of their tails. And so they were used for medicinal purposes and were basically extinct at one time in the British Isles. And so these things were, our world is depleted of resources. Sometimes, it's mostly for greed. And we're seeing that now. We're seeing that with the world being assaulted for minerals and the polar ice caps melting away and at risk from who gets to have Greenland to melt it down. We see this with the fracking. We see this with messaging that is against the wind turbines, which might not be the best solution, but it is the best solution that we have. For instance, and I'm going to stop talking in a second, but I share this with everybody whenever it comes to my mind. I like to watch movies. I was watching a Netflix movie that was made in Australia, and it was a murder mystery. I like murder mysteries. And the person, one of the suspects that the viewer was geared toward looking at, was an environmentalist. And he would pick up dead birds on these vast plains. But whenever he picked up a dead bird, the camera looked over at a wind turbine. So here we're getting the subliminal messaging going around. Wind turbines are evil or bad. And it's just amazing. So this story is reverence for the earth, for the trees, and being diligent in really looking for clear information and knowing what the sources are to make real decisions and, again, to live deliberately. So, all right, I'm done talking. That's why.
Absolutely, truly said, Denise. Even in Indian cultures, we revere trees a lot. Like you mentioned, every temple of ours has a tree, which belongs to the temple, it is said. And of course, everything medicinal and everything else comes to us from the trees. So yes, rightly said. Maria, please go ahead. You want to say something?
So shades of Scheherazade and Red Riding Hood in that story, Denise. But what I was curious about was possibly, was this story from a ballad? You mentioned how you heard it, but and then you sang, and I immediately thought, oh, perhaps it was originally a ballad, and that's why you couldn't find a written version of it.
It has those traces, which is exactly what ballads were used for. It was an easy way to learn and remember stories, to pass them down through the oral tradition. it's such an easy story. There's not a whole lot to remember in it. It's a couple of bullets with the song in there. So it does definitely fall into a ballad category, but that's like the singing bone as well. I mean, you can parse in the spoken, a couple of non-singing pieces, but the singing pieces kind of carry it along. Even the tone of it, I mean, when you hear a ballad, it can be slow and mournful, or it can be something that's a little bit upbeat and gayer, to go with.
Well, I
So
thought that
think
you made the song. That's why I
no, no,
asked.
no, no, no.
Oh,
This is
okay.
no, that's what I'm saying. So this actually has bearing on how old the song is.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm sorry. I
No,
guess I
no.
wasn't
It
clear.
makes it more interesting. That's
Yeah.
that's fine.
No, yeah, it bears remnants of the earlier day from which it came because of that piece.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're
Oh,
welcome.
again, beautifully told.
Thank you.
Yeah, the fact that the song is from a long time ago, it adds to the interesting thing. Yeah, thank you so much, Denise. Anyone
welcome.
else
Thank
would like to
you.
say anything? Okay, so let's move on to the next story then. Okay. So from the woods to the waters. And because from the water is where the cause for the next story seems to arise. It is like a trigger of chain of a confusing comical set of events, a comedy of errors, if you may say so, and bringing to us this lively and entertaining story is the illustrious storyteller and scholar from Montreal, Oro Librowicz. Oro, please tell us a little bit more about yourself, and please tell us the story. Oro. Let me spotlight you for a minute. 1 second.
Yeah, and Oro, you need to turn your mic on.
Sorry. Yes, of course. Okay. So I am a Jewish storyteller from Montreal, Canada. I've been telling stories for close to 30 years in different languages, in French, which is the official language of the province of Quebec, where I live, in English, of course, and in my native tongue, which is Spanish and Judeo-Spanish. If someone would like me to ask a question about Judeo-Spanish, I'll do it later after the story, if you're interested in knowing what Judeo-Spanish is. My repertoire consists of Jewish stories of wisdom, but for this festival, I chose a story from the iconic Book of Tales, 1001 Arabian Nights. So this is the story that Scheherazade told her husband, Sultan Shahryar, on the 123rd night. Once upon a time, in Casgrain, on the borders of Great Tartary, there lived a tailor who had a beautiful wife whom he loved and who loved him in return. One day, as he was working, a little hunchback came and sat down at the entrance of his shop and started singing while playing the tambourine. The tailor enjoyed his songs And he decided to invite him home to cheer up his wife. With his pleasant songs, he will entertain us. The hunchback accepted, and the tailor closed his shop and took the hunchback home. His wife had prepared a delicious fish dinner. The three of them sat down to eat, but unfortunately, the hunchback swallowed a large fish bone and choked to death. Now the tailor and his wife panicked because they were afraid that people would accuse them of killing the hunchback. Now the tailor remembered that there was a Jewish doctor in the neighborhood. So with the help of his wife, he took the body of the hunchback to the doctor as a patient. When the servant opened the door without even lighting a candle, the tailor said, "Quick, quick, fetch your master. We bring him a very sick patient. Take this silver coin that we give him in advance for his good services." Now, while the servant went to fetch the doctor, the tailor and his wife placed the body of the hunchback on top of a very steep stair. When the doctor came out of his room, he rushed. He was going down the stairs, and since it was dark, he bumped into the body and sent it all the way down. "Quick, quick," he said, "there has been an accident. Bring a lantern." He went down the stairs and he discovered the lifeless body of the hunchback. "What have I done? I killed this poor patient." He went to his wife and told her about his misadventure. And his wife, who had a vivid imagination, said, "Let's take the body to the terrace of our house and throw it down the chimney of our neighbor." Now, the neighbor in question was the Sultan's provider of oil, butter, all kinds of oil, of fats that he needed in the palace. Now, he was a Muslim man. He was coming from a wedding feast. He entered his home with a lantern, and he saw the body of the hunchback. Thinking that he was a thief, he took a big stick and started hitting him. The body fell down. He continued hitting him until he realized that the body was motionless. "What have I done? I've killed this poor thief. I've taken my revenge too far." What could he do? Get rid of the body. So, took the body in his bag, exited his house, and set the body up against a shop down the street. Now, day was breaking out, and he was a Christian merchant who had been feasting all night and was returning home completely drunk. He was quickening his pace because he was afraid that some Muslim going to the mosque for the morning prayers would denounce him as a drunkard. So as he was walking fast, he passed by the shop and hit the body of the hunchback that fell on his back. He thought he was attacked. He asked for help, help. the lieutenant of police who was nearby rushed over, and he saw a Christian mistreating a Muslim because the hunchback was a Muslim. And he reprimanded him. He took him to the police station after realizing that he had killed the poor man, the hunchback. He interrogated him, and the merchant couldn't deny his crime. Now, it so happened that the hunchback was the Sultan's jester, and the Sultan was very fond of his jester. The lieutenant of police went to the palace, told the Sultan about the accident, and the Sultan decided that the defendant had to be hung. A gallows was erected in the middle of the public square that started filling with people because it was already daytime. And as the executioner was going to put the rope around the merchant's neck, someone in the crowd shouted, "Don't kill this man." It was the Muslim, the neighbor of the doctor's neighbor. And he said, no, that man is innocent. It's enough for me to have killed a Muslim without having on my conscience the death of an innocent Christian. And he told his story, how he had hit the thief and had killed him. Well, now the executioner was about to tie the rope to kill the Sultan's provider. And then another voice was heard in the crowd. It was that of the Jewish doctor. And he said, no, this man is innocent. I killed this poor patient. Of course, I didn't do it willingly. And he told his story, how he had bumped into the patient and sent him down the stairs, and that was an accident, and he had killed him. Well, now the executioner was going to send the doctor to the other world when another voice was heard. It was that of the tailor. "Stop this! Almost 3 men were almost killed today, but they are innocent. Please hear my story." And he told the story of how he had invited the hunchback for dinner, and the hunchback had died accidentally by swallowing a large fishbone. Everyone in the square was amazed at the circumstances of this accident. And now 4 men took the body of the hunchback to the palace, and the lieutenant of police told the Sultan about the strange circumstances of his jester's death. And the Sultan found the story so singular that he called his personal historian and have it record the story in writing in all its details. And in turn, Sultan Shahryar found the story so singular that he granted another day of life to his wife, Scheherazade. And if you want to know why I chose this story, first of all, it reminded me of the society in which I grew up in my native Morocco. I was born in northern Morocco, and at that time, northern Morocco was a Spanish protectorate, so that in my town of Tetuan, near Tangier, there were Muslims, Jews, and Christians living side by side. But that was not the main reason why I chose this story. I chose it because in the beginning of the story, each character tried to save his skin, so to speak, by, accusing someone else of the death of this poor man. And by the end of the story, each one changed. They transformed themselves, and they were ready to face death to save the person who was going to be executed. So that was the main reason why I chose this story.
Wonderful, Oro. As you rightly said, in the beginning, they're trying to save themselves, and then there's a change of heart, and then they try to save the person who is going to get executed. What
Right.
a lovely, and it's also, and we could visualize all the scenes that you were, as you were telling the story, I could see all the scenes as you were describing them. How the person fell on the shoulder and he had to push him back. And wonderful, wonderful. It's so nice to see these comical stories, but with an underlying moral or a message, if I may say so. Light-hearted situations, but they do communicate a lot.
I think there is a
Rachel,
question.
you want to say something? Yes.
Yes. This story is such a contrast to things that happened in many parts of the world where there was anti-Semitism, and around Passover, Christians and other people would accuse Jews of murdering a child to use the blood in their ritual matzah. Now, Judaism does not allow any such murder and does not allow any blood in any food. And so this was done to start vendettas against the Jews called pogroms. And in this story, it is the exact opposite. Christians, Jews, Muslims, all at first want to save themselves, but they are all willing to sacrifice themselves for someone of a different religion, a different nationality, so that justice will be done, so that innocent people will not be harmed. And that is what I took from this story, that it is the exact opposite, that people are willing to sacrifice their own lives to save someone. And that is such a noble and altruistic story that is so hopeful in contrast to some past history.
Thank you for your remark. Yes.
Very, very well put, Rachel. How noble of them to step in, right?
Right.
Yes, Maria, would you like to say something?
Just briefly to build on what Rachel just said, actually. Or first of all, it's a wonderful story. But secondly, it ties into the discussion we had earlier about bystander, doesn't it? And once again shows how the old stories are still relevant today.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Anybody else would like to say a few words, comment on the story? I'd like to ask other members of the audience if you had to change a particular bit in the story. What might that be? Anyone? Not that it needs to, but in case we would like to put in our creativity at some point, what might that be? Would anybody like to attempt? Okay.
Well, Divya, do you have any suggestion?
No, I wanted to ask if there was something in the story that could be like, probably the person wouldn't have choked at all. But then that wouldn't have led to the story at all. If it were up to me. But then it's a tale, it's a fable. That's the starting point of the story. But just wanted to put it out there in case anybody wanted to answer. What do you think, Eric?
Would you like to change something in the story or add something? You yourself.
Me?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Claire. I'm sorry I can't be on. Well, I guess I can.
Oh, yes.
I'm riding
Claire,
my bicycle to work.
Go ahead.
Good morning here in New York. I love that story. And it's actually many years ago when I first started telling stories. It was one of the first stories I learned.
Oh, wow.
But I think I like your question. What would you change? And I think maybe I would focus more on the fact that the first person to meet his end, the kind of the catalyst of the story, focus more on the fact that he was a musician and a jester, and not so much on his physical appearance.
Right.
Oh, so you would take that part a little bit more because he was the musician and the jester. Yeah, that would probably lead to a lot more interesting things, he being the jester and all that, right? Ah, lovely. That's a nice perspective. Rachel, yes?
Well, like you, I originally would have liked the hunchback not to have choked on the fishbone, and then we would not have the story. But allowing myself to be fabulous, the hunchback is brought to the doctor. The doctor trips on him, and it dislodges the fishbone, and the hunchback is revived. But unfortunately, we don't get much of the story and all the nobility. But yeah, why not have the impossible?
Then there would be no story almost.
Right, there'd be no story, but that's a thoughtful thing. When the doctor trips, the bone just comes out. Wow, wonderful. We have another new parallel story there. Thank you, Rachel. Jeff, yes?
I was always taught that one does not change a story. The bones and skeleton of a story must remain the same, or you are not true to the story. The only thing you can ever change in a story are descriptions. You can change how somebody's dressed or how their hair's combed, but the story itself, you don't change. If you do, you violate the story. You must keep the skeleton. And the one thing about that story, I love that story, but everybody seems to miss the fact that all those people were guilty. Yes, they were very noble at the very last, but they were all guilty. They all thought they killed somebody and they tried to hide the body.
Right.
There are lots of layers in that story.
Except the tailor. The tailor knew that it was an accident, but he was afraid. But he knew that he hadn't, laid a hand on the musician, on the hunchback. But all the others thought that they had really killed this poor man.
But he still hid the body.
Right. Yes. Yes.
He didn't do anything wrong, but he still hid the body, which in most cultures is still a crime.
That's right. He lied.
All of
He
them were
lied
guilty to a
to
degree.
the doctor. Yeah.
Probably the doctor more than anybody.
You know, when we make changes in a story or add to it, it becomes a different story. And you know, there's nothing wrong with creating a different story that was inspired by the original story. But I guess it, you know, one should say it that this is my you know, new inspiration, if one does that.
Right.
But the first thing we were taught at Penn Folklore, where I did a PhD in folklore, is that folk tales are always changing. Everybody who tells a folk tale tells it in his or her individual way. So it's always in a process of evolving.
Right.
But at the same time, I understand what you mean. The stories that have been passed down over the generations often have a certain wisdom in them or a certain statement in them, and one wants to you know, let that statement come out.
Right.
Right, right. Thank you, Eric, for that.
Mm-hmm.
And in the chat, Janet has asked Oro that, I hope this question is for Oro. It says, please explain what you mentioned before your story about heritage, because she is not able to remember what was said. Oro, will it be able to do
Yes.
that? Will
Yes,
you be able to just,
I said
yeah.
that my native language is Spanish and Judeo-Spanish. So for that, I have to do, like, in a capsule, a little bit of history. The Jews of particularly northern Morocco are descendants of the Jews who were expelled from Spain by the Inquisition in 1492, the same year as when Christopher Columbus set sail to America. Now, those Jews who were expelled from Spain, they were given two options: either convert to Catholicism or leave, be exiled. So those who didn't remain in Spain and you know, converted, went mostly to what was then the Ottoman Empire, which was Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria, Bosnia. Okay, and some of them went to North Africa. My ancestors went to the town where I was born. And what is very peculiar is that all those Jews who left Spain, either those who settled in the Ottoman Empire or in Northern Africa, kept their Spanish language. They were very attached to their roots, their Spanish roots, so that, let's say, the language was passed on for close to 5 centuries. And of course, it became, I mean, it was a bit archaic with the sounds of the 15th century Spanish. And it was enriched by Hebrew words, Arabic words, in the Ottoman Empire by Greek words, Turkish words, etc. So it became what is called the Judeo-Spanish. So that's in a capsule what Judeo-Spanish is.
Oh, thank you, Oro. I'm hearing the word Judeo-Spanish for the first time today, and thank you for that. Like they say, today I learned TIL. Yes. Denise, you want to say something?
No,
I just very quickly, and thank you for that story, Ora. That was lovely. With regard to the role of folktales and mythologies, they follow the monomyth or Carl Jung's plot which we all live by. And so they really are showing us that we can overcome fears, overcome challenges. If we have a goal that we are trying to achieve, that even if we are disrupted by some obstacle, that we can still manage to find a way to get there, that we can go to other people for their advice who have been there before. And they really are life's little instruction booklet. And as I have been looking at a lot of collective memory through histories of different groups of people, for example, the history of the kings of Britain or those of Wales or wherever the case may be, those stories, even though they might be looked at as fantastical in some ways, it's the actions and intentions of the people in them who give such strong example of what it means to do your duty, what it means to be a good leader, and by the same token, what it means not to be. So those are messages that are still relevant because they are showing us basically our own lives. And when they do get fractured or made into funny entertainment, and that's where they're left laying, that message is lost. So that reflection is so important. And there's always something new to find in a story because we're always in a different place in our lives. That's it. I just want to say that. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but sometimes it just needs to come out of the pie hole.
Thank you, Denise. And so with that, let's move on to the next teller. Thank you so much, Oro.
Thank you.
Oro
I have to
mentioning she had to leave somewhere.
I have a doctor's appointment. So
doctor's appointment, yes.
Thank
you
you
so much for patiently going through the discussion with us. But yeah, thank you. Thanks once again. So we move on to the next teller, the last teller of today's session. And so why do we do what we do? And what drives us to do it? And how do we find that thing? Probably we all look for these answers. Today, somewhat on these lines, I think, to enable us, is Yogi Shri Dada Maheshvarananda ji of Anandmarg, Asheville. Dadaji, we are extremely blessed to have you with us today. And please tell us a little bit more about your work at Anandmarg and tell us the story. Over to you, Dadaji.
Everything's in the story. It's 1974. I'm 21 years old. I just moved to New Orleans to live with my father for a while. There are no cell phones, no personal computers. I'm wearing my favorite pair of bell-bottom blue jeans with 10 patches that I sewed on and embroidered myself. My brown hair is just about this long. I'd come to New Orleans because I dropped out of Earlham College the year before. I actually loved studying there. African American studies, women's studies, peace studies. It was my home for 2 years, but it felt too comfortable and I was too privileged. I thought I should experience the world outside of academia. So I quit. Now I've come to stay in my father's home. It's fine for a while, I guess, but I really don't know what I'm going to do with my life. Today I walked through nearby Tulane University and I see a little notice on the bulletin board that says, "Free yoga class by Anandmarg." I like free. So I decided to go. Only hippies and weirdos did yoga back in 1974, you have to remember. Yoga mats don't exist back then. So the 30 college students and I, we all bring a blanket to practice on. The instructor gave us 2 instructions. He was a college student. He said, stretch but never strain, and you should practice every day. I followed that and was surprised by how much I liked it. My body became more flexible. I got more energy. I was healthier. I learned how to relax better, actually. I finally decided whatever I do decide to do in my life, I think I'm going to keep doing this yoga. After a week, the instructor also says, I'll also give some orientation about spiritual meditation for those of you who are interested. This will also be free of charge. I like free. A Filipino monk, dressed like I am today, arrives and sits me down, and I learn a personal mantra and meditation technique. He says, you should practice 20 minutes twice a day. Where will I ever find the time? But the amazing thing is that one of the first benefits I got from meditation is more time. My mind starts to become calmer and more focused. I find that I listen to other people better, that I quickly feel connected and more focused. I don't have to talk for hours and hours in circles to feel connected to people. I find I don't read a page in a book and realize I don't remember anything and have to read the whole page again. I don't put down a piece of paper and find I have to look for 20 minutes where I put it. I start to change. I lose interest in getting high with alcohol or drugs because I experience bliss with no hangover. And I like free. A simple quote from the founder of Ananda Marga is, you are never alone or helpless. The force that guides the stars guides you too. Is that even possible? That there's a consciousness, a higher intelligence in the universe that knows who I am and what I'm doing? If there is, can it guide me to knowing what I should do in my life? I decide to try farming. I send out some letters and receive a reply from a 3rd generation farmer in Wisconsin. Very nervously, the only problem is he lives 1,000 miles away and I'm broke. So with a backpack, $20 in my pocket, and a piece of cardboard so I can write the name of the next big city on my journey, I nervously start walking up to the highway. I stick out my thumb. I intentionally smile at every driver that passes. And if anybody smiles back, I figure that's a victory. But an incredible string of miraculous encounters takes place. An old woman stops and tells me, I never pick up hitchhikers, but today I'm making an exception. Then a huge 18-wheeler truck pulls up. The trucker tells me, "My company doesn't allow us to take passengers. But never mind that. Get in." So many different people show me kindness. No human agency, not even the FBI or the CIA, could possibly organize the perfect timing of dozens of drivers crisscrossing the country and passing the exact spot where I am minutes after the last driver dropped me off there. Only the Great Spirit does such miracles over and over and over again. One night, I sleep in the grass at a rest stop in the middle of the Great Plains. I look at this vast canopy of stars overhead. And in the morning, just as the dawn was breaking, I sit up in my sleeping bag, and the sky becomes this kaleidoscope of beautiful colors, orange and reds and yellows. I'm in awe. This painting, these colors are changing every instant, and it's like 50 miles across. The only artist who can paint that is the Great Spirit. I believe I must be about 500 miles from anyone I know. I didn't know that many people back then. Yet strangely, I feel home. For me, home is where I feel safe and loved. Whatever I decide to do in my life, I want to stay spiritually connected to this wonderful feeling of being home, safe, and loved wherever I go. I get to the farm, and I like the healthy, honest work of the farm. One day, the old father of the farmer I work for asked me, "What do you want to do in your life?" I told him I really don't know. "Well, whatever you do, you better like it, because you're going to have to do an awful lot of work in your lifetime." That sounds like pretty good advice to me. After 6 months on the farm, I decide I want to serve people more. I return to New Orleans and get a job working as an orderly in the psychiatric hospital. I like that work too, but I feel restless to do something more. I decide that I want to experience the force that guides the stars, guides you too. I want to combine my love for spiritual connection with my love of helping people and my passion to end poverty and injustice too. I decide to become a yogic monk so I can share the wisdom that I'm learning and serve humanity. To earn the right to wear a uniform of orange, the color that symbolizes service and sacrifice. I love what I do, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I worked for 40 years in Southeast Asia and then South America. Now I'm back in the United States where I started, but I remember a poem I learned in school by T.S. Eliot. It finally makes sense to me. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Thank you.
Oh, Dadaji, that was beautifully and blissfully narrated, and amusing.
Thank you.
Amusing as well. How you went on that quest of yours and found your calling in passing on the wisdom to people. Really wonderful. Thank you for taking us on that travel. It was funny how the trigger for the journey began by the word free, but how enriching it became, right?
I still teach for free. I still work for free. So I still like free.
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah, people are richer because of that. Yeah, wonderful, Dadaji. Good. Opening out to the audience. Anybody wants to say something about Dadaji's? Yes, Denise.
I think 65 is a magic number. I think when we get to be 65, we're not so concerned about what other people think or of what we have or don't have, and that we are looking in how we can just simply be who we are in connection with other, whether it's other people or other entities, essences, spirit, vibration, with the world. And I think that becomes the major impetus to what we do, is to try to have a positive impact with that, and recognizing those things that we find ourselves grateful for. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. I'm just 72 now, and I've noticed that ever since I was 7 years old, I think that anybody younger than me is really young, you know? They don't know much, you know? They're not as old as I am. But yes, thank you very much.
Sudha ma'am?
Yeah, that was beautifully narrated, Dada Maheshvarananda. Being a yoga practitioner myself, I fully endorse what you said. And you remember you mentioned that, when you were traveling, at every stop where you got off, someone came along to take you. I think that's what we call synchronicity.
Or miracles or grace.
Yes. But Carl Jung called that synchronicity.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course.
And I think many coincidences happen in life, because I do yoga and I also practice Reiki. So you can see these things happening, which you can't explain, but the timing is just right. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you're practicing your yoga.
I am. Divya, you're muted now.
So sorry.
Divya?
So I was just mentioning we can have one more point from somebody, pointer, for a minute or so, and after that I can do the closing comments, because we have a workshop which is to follow. Anybody else?
Can I go ahead?
Yes. Who? I'm sorry. Who is that?
Dawood here.
Oh yes, Doctor. Please.
So first of all, Dadaji, thank you so much. So beautiful. It was almost poetic. And what I wanted to ask you was, and I'm almost turning 50, and you make me feel younger just the way you expressed yourself. So one piece of advice. So I've got a 20 years, a valley to cross when I reach you. One piece of advice to all of us out here, perhaps from what you derived from your life and what you've done over the years.
You can keep learning all the time. And I think meditation is a wonderful way to stay connected with all people, all living creatures, and all consciousness in the universe.
Thank you.
Ansuk wanted to say something from Korea.
Okay.
Hello, from
Hello.
South Korea.
Hello, Ansuk. Yeah. Hello.
Thank you. I've read a lot of stories like what you told us, but in real person, I heard from you how you just make your life like this kind of real spiritual guru. I appreciate and thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you, Ansuk.
much.
And allow me to just close the session today. Thank you all so much for being here. Wonderful stories, wonderful narration. Truly, truly thankful, feeling grateful as well. And today we truly traveled, I must say, starting from the womb all the way. And I think we are like trees. We may grow in different soils, but we may sway in different winds, but we all go down to the same ground, having our roots intertwined. And I think that's a parallel we can draw to the connections that we were supposed to make. So yes, journey is not only about the miles covered, but by the connections discovered, if I may. So yes, to more connections and more bonding. Thank you so much once again for this lovely evening. Until we meet next time, bye-bye to all of you. And now we'll have a workshop. Please do stay on. And yeah, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Divya. You hosted that session beautifully.